Welcome back and happy Earth Day to everyone. I am Felicia Watts, chairman of the GreenKeeper team and a part of the Health and Wellbeing Services team here at Georgia Power. I am so excited to introduce our conversation with Dr. Ann, best-selling author, physician, and motivational speaker in nutrition and healthy living. She is no stranger to Georgia Power. We're so excited to have her. She is the author of 6 books, including her best-selling, award-winning Eat Right for Life series. She's been featured in many national media outlets, including Dr. Oz Show, Oprah, and many more. Hundreds of businesses, including ours, the Southern Company, have used her books to guide their employees to better health. We're so excited to have her today and engage her in conversation. I also have one of my teammates, Savi Anderson, who is going to join in this conversation with Dr. Ann. And Savi, I'm going to kick it off to you to start this conversation with Dr. Ann.
Thanks, Felicia. Hi, Dr. Ann.
Hey.
I'm Savi Anderson. I am a big fan of your work. In fact, my entire family has seen your happiness plan videos, and I think we do a pretty good job of following your advice. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. As you know, we are here today to talk about Earth Day and how our choices each day can have a positive impact on our Earth if we are intentional. We want to protect our natural resources and have a healthy place to live, work, and play in the future. We want to engage our employees and peers in this conversation as well. So can you share your perspective on what things we can do around our food print that may make a difference long-term for our environment and our Earth?
Yes, first of all, what a pleasure and what an honor to be taking part in this critically important conversation. So I just have to, tip my hat to Georgia Power, actually high five all of you and your teams and Georgia Power for embracing, celebrating Earth Day, and just acknowledging the importance of the health of our planet. Because at the end of the day, a conversation about human health is a moot point if we don't have a healthy planet. And we can no longer, particularly as it relates to food and nutrition, divorce the health of the planet from the conversation of healthy eating for the human body. And the fact of the matter is that food production, and this is a really important overarching point, food production is a leading driver of environmental degradation, loss of natural resources, and it's everything from greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, loss of species biodiversity, shrinking of our aquifers, toxic pollution. It is a leading driver across the board. And in knowing that, the next most important thing for people to know is that your food choices by far have the greater impact. On a relative scale, it doesn't so much matter where it's coming from, how it's packaged. It is what are the choices you're making as far as the types of foods that you're eating. Let's just talk about greenhouse gas emissions, right? So beef, hands down, by far, nothing else is near it. If you look at the greenhouse gas emissions to produce a kilogram of beef, it's 60 kilograms carbon equivalents, 60. So just remember the number 60. If you look at dairy, so beef and dairy, the top two sources of stress for environment, it's 21. If you look at pork, it's 7, poultry, it's 6, fish is 5. Plant-based foods, every single one of them are going to be less than 3. Most all of them are less than 2, and many of them are less than 1. So beef and dairy are those two things collectively responsible for 75% of all the greenhouse gas emissions that come from food production, which is about 30% of the world's total of greenhouse gas emissions. So food choice is huge, and it's shifting away from animal-based foods, more toward plants for reasons I mentioned earlier. And again, it's not just the greenhouse gas emissions with beef and dairy. leading source of loss of species biodiversity, leading source of deforestation. They take more water, way more water than anything else. Anyway, so to produce a calorie of beef is 100 times more land than a calorie of plant-based protein like beans or tofu or tempeh or peas. So food choices are what really matter. And even a baby step, a teeny step, because beef is such huge impact. If you're eating beef every day or twice a day, can you eat it once a day? If you're eating beef 5 times a week, can you go to 3? Or can you just substitute pork? I mean, any movement you make there is going to be anything else you could do. And let me put it in perspective, because a lot of people don't get this. If you could just take less than one day's worth of beef or dairy and substitute chicken, fish, or plant-based protein, you are going to decrease your greenhouse gas emissions more than if you bought everything local. I mean, it's massive. So really important. There's such a lack of knowledge in this area. And listen, I like beef. Don't think I'm someone that doesn't like beef. I love it. But you can't deny the facts. And there's been a 500% increase in global demand for red meat over the last 25 years. So it's not sustainable. And guess what? That's also one of the top things you can do for your health if you're consuming a lot of red meat, is to decrease your intake.
So Dr. Ann, you brought up so many great points just about, eating more plants. You talk about that in Eat Right for Life and how important, going that plant slant way. But yet there's kind of a phobia about, being quote a vegetarian and not getting enough protein. So can you talk to us about how you can get plant-based proteins? And again, not saying because you just said that we do love meat and it's okay to eat meat, but how can, if you decide to go, you talk about meatless Mondays and ways to, so how can you get plant-based protein and ensure you have enough if you choose to start cutting back on some of that meat?
Great question. First of all, in America, no one is, less than 2% of people are deficient in protein. So most people are eating way more than they really need. And it's actually kind of a problem. So don't get freaked out about not getting enough. You can be vegan and vegetarian if you're doing it right, and you're getting way enough. So what are the plant-based sources of protein? So whole soy foods, soy milk, tofu, tempeh, beans, nuts and seeds, but even green vegetables. Half of the calories in dark leafy greens are from protein. So there's a lot of myth that, I'm not going to get enough protein. I'm not going to get my amino acids. It's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. In fact, way, infinitely more pressing is that people aren't getting enough fiber. And where can you get fiber? You get your fiber from your plants. And again, any movement we can get people to make in terms of environmental impact and even health, even baby steps, less animals, more plants, huge return on that.
Great. So, we already spoke about one barrier in thinking that plant-based foods may not give us enough protein. But what are some other barriers that you think that can cause us as a culture to limit plants in our diet? And can you share a couple of steps for beginners to work through these barriers?
Sure. It seems the biggest barrier is there's lack of knowledge of the positive impact on the environment. That's one. Most people have no idea the relative impact of plants versus animals on the environment. So that's one thing. So know that it makes a big difference for the health of the earth. The second thing is cost. This plant-based eating unfortunately has developed this sort of like elitist element to it, which really makes me crazy because it could not be farther from the truth. If you look at what you pay portion size or weight for plant-based foods across the board, they're going to be cheaper than meat across the board. in every single aisle in the grocery store, you can trade up nutrition and not increase price or even go down in price. Some of the healthiest foods you can eat are some of the cheapest you can get. Think of whole grains. Think of beans. You can get a serving of beans for 9 cents, serving of whole grains for 11 cents. Compare that to a serving of beef. The other thing that I think is really important here is we need to get people to start placing the value in foods on the things that they should value. So last I looked around, people didn't need more calories. Everyone is aware. We now have 42% of our population who are clinically obese, right? So calories are not what Americans need. And again, 75% are either obese or overweight. What we need is these life-changing, healing nutrients. We need vegetables, we need vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, fiber. Where can you get those foods? And the return, I'm talking saving money. I'm talking, improving your productivity. When you eat those foods relative to the, typical American diet foods, it's huge. It's huge. So cost should not be, that's a myth, should not be cost. If you want healthy eating to be expensive, boy, can it be, but it doesn't have to be. Water is free. Beans are cheap. Whole grains are cheap. You can get an apple. You get 150 beneficial bioactive compounds in an apple. You can get that. You can get a bag of chips for that same price. But what do you get in the bag of chips? Not really anything except things that hurt you, right? So focus on the wowing benefits of those things to help you not have to pay for medical bills and to help you be way more productive in your life and live longer and things like that. So cost. The other big one, I'll just kind of run through them, is, they don't know how to prepare them. They don't even, they're like, how do I make them tasty? So first of all, oh my gosh, there's so many videos. I have videos. There are videos all over the web that are free that can guide you in how to make delicious plant-based meals. And, the key thing, like if you're not roasting vegetables, learn to roast vegetables. It's so flippin' easy. It makes them so delicious. And you're going to use things, learn to use herbs and spices. Why? They add flavor to your food. They're like drugs without side effects for healing you. And they have no side effects except giving your food flavor. So using lots of herbs and spices, learn to use lemon and lime and vinegar and miso and coconut aminos and hot sauce, all those things you can use that, make plant foods taste delicious. And I always say, I am such a foodie. People don't realize I am as much a foodie and as much someone who absolutely lives to eat for pleasure as I do eating to make my health better tomorrow than I am today. Mm-hmm. And I just can't believe how great tasting the foods I get to eat are. And I do most of my cooking, and I didn't go to chef school. I just learned to do it on my own. And yeah, if you could be a fly on the wall in my house and see how we talk about food and how delicious it is, just because I do it, and the more you do it, the better you get. So anyway, I could pretty much bust any myth that comes, bust anything anyone wants to say as far as a barrier. And there are barriers, but, learning, getting the knowledge right, making sure that much of what's perpetuated is a myth, using resources that are free, like my videos or videos on you can get to like teach you how to cook things. It's really easy. It's not hard.
Okay. Great points. And you have fabulous videos. Your motivational Mondays are great. You have a YouTube channel out there. Everyone can subscribe. So I have two follow-up questions, 2 points you brought up that not everyone may know, which is why fiber is so important. We don't get enough. Americans get a fraction. And so why do they need it?
So critically important. So this is one of the biggest stories in my world, and one of the biggest stories actually in the medical scientific world, is the reality of the microbiome. We now know that that ecosystem of gut bacteria that lives in all of us really is the gateway to health and healing. It is your gut microbiome that it really determines your future health. And although there's a lot left for us to learn about it, we know that the only thing that the good gut bacteria can eat, which is what you need in you, they're basically running your body. It's not really your brain. Your brain is taking direction from the microbiome, and then it's involved. But the microbiome is running the show in your body, and you need a healthy one. That means you need a big supply and lots of species diversity, healthy ecosystems of good bacteria. The only thing good bacteria can eat and thrive on and multiply from is fiber. And what are the only foods that have fiber? Whole plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. That's why you're never, ever going to see this statement go away. The healthiest diet for humans, because we have rock solid data on this, is a plant predominant, whole foods, plant predominant diet. Okay, whole food, that will never go away. Never go away. The data is beyond rock solid. It's solid as steel, right? Or the hardest thing we have. I don't know what the hardest element is, but it is that hard. So we have way more issues with people not getting enough fiber than really probably any other area of nutrition. They're just not getting enough fiber.
That's great.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to fight inflammation. You bring that out in.
Yes. Gosh, if you know what the bacteria do with the fiber, they're turning it into SCAPA, short chain fatty acids, which are like, you can't believe all the things they do. You think, oh, that can't be real. It can't be real. It's true. Yeah. SCAPAs are literally like miracle compounds. They decrease your appetite. They boost your metabolism. They boost your mood. They reduce your blood sugar. Just so many amazing things they do. And SCAPAs are the byproduct of the bacteria fermenting and basically eating that fiber.
And then the other thing that you brought up in the beginning is that dairy, is one of the things that impacts our food print and our environment.
Sure.
So there's a concern, I know, that, we think that that's where we get our calcium and that's where we get our vitamin D and so many things. So talk to us about those plant-based forms of dairy that are out there, and should there be a concern about not getting, the nutrients that we associate with dairy?
Okay. So first of all, calcium is a very important nutrient. There's still some controversy over like really how much we need. There really kind of is a little bit on that. It may be exaggerated in our country, perhaps as a result of the influence of the dairy industry. Anyway, there's many foods that will give you calcium. You don't have to be someone that does dairy to get your calcium. So any green vegetables, broccoli, any vegetable that's green, beans, tofu, canned fish with bones, nuts can have calcium. So there's many other, ways to get it. Then we have these calcium fortified plant-based milks. So most all soy milks are going to have the same amount of calcium as you get in cow's milk, but it's, now we have all sorts of milk alternatives out there, the nut milks and the oat milks and the hemp milks and the rice milks. And most all of them, and if you're going to go with these milk alternatives, be sure they are fortified with calcium, because that's very valuable to get it in that way. Then vitamin D, we are meant to get vitamin D from the sun. And there's a reason why very few foods have it. The only foods that naturally have vitamin D are oily fish. There's a little bit in egg yolks, and there's a little bit in certain mushrooms, depending on how they've grown. And anyway, so say prudent sun exposure, you can't get your vitamin D solely from diet. It's impossible. You cannot. And so I think that the vitamin D in dairy is, in the scheme of things, really not making a massive contribution. You can certainly get that by, getting just outdoors safely a bit more, or taking a vitamin D supplement, which is, there are very few supplements that have an evidence base behind them, but that would be one that is. And a lot of people are hearing about vitamin D with COVID. We know it is a risk factor for getting more severe COVID. You don't want to be low in vitamin D. And most people are learning they should get their vitamin, and most physicians are now aware in checking their patients' vitamin D levels. So.
Very good.
So Dr. Ann, let's touch on food waste and how we can have a positive impact here.
Another enormous, pivotal step here. So the statistics on food waste are staggering, shocking, and for me, heartbreaking. And as you would expect, wealthy countries are the biggest perpetrators of food waste, and we are at the top. In this country, conservatively, 1/3 of the food that is acquired for the home is wasted. 1/3. That amounts to $240 billion a year. That's just in America, down the drain. That is average cost for the average American family household. That's $1,900 a year. And in terms of its impact on the environment, what people need to know is food waste is a huge source of greenhouse gas emissions, methane. And if you look at, if you take food waste globally and it became a country, it would be the third largest, contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, food waste, versus China, then America, then food waste. It's third. It's a big deal. So lots of work to do in this area. And that's another one where, if you just had to pick two things to do that would, there's nothing else near it that you could do. Decrease your beef and decrease your food waste. So what are the strategies for decreasing food waste? It starts with shopping smartly, consciously, mindfully, have a plan, know what you're getting. You're getting it because you're going to be planning to eat and it's going to be part of the mood, a meal, a food, right? Don't buy things you're not going to eat. Know that, some things are way, way, way more perishable. Berries and green beans and little baby lettuces are way more perishable, but there's some super healthy things that are way more shelf stable. Beans, whole grains, onions, think cabbage versus baby spinach. There's so many ways. And so, be mindful in the store. Then when you have your food at home, eat the super perishable stuff first. Eat your berries first, eat your green beans first, go through your lettuce first, and save the cabbage and the other things, and the sweet potatoes and the winter squashes, which like 6 months, they can sit on the shelf. So that's important. Then beyond that, know how to properly package your food up, because people don't do that right, and that's why it goes bad, right? So proper packaging of your food and storage of your food. And then embrace smoothies, soups, and stews, and like rice dishes. I'll tell you kind of what I do in my house. And to use your tired vegetables so you don't waste them. So one thing I do once a week, and it's like, I call it my being lazy, but it's great. It's great. I love it. It tastes delicious. My husband does, and it's great for the environment. And I just did it, not last night, the night before. So I start with a big batch of brown rice or quinoa. And then I'm always going to use onions, because I use onions, and onions last a long time. And I use onions in almost everything I cook. So I start with sauteing onions, then I open my refrigerator up, and I'm going to use every tired vegetable I have in there. So the other night I had one zucchini. Don't ask me why I had just one left, but I had one zucchini. I had a green bell pepper that I know when I bought it was starting to look kind of ratty. I had half of a red bell pepper. I had a package of mushrooms that, again, I'd had those things about a week. So I diced all those things up. And that was a one dish meal. That was my main meal. And then we had a salad. And as part of that salad, I had leftover salad. I had some leftover cabbage salad. Lasts a little bit better than lettuce salad in the fridge. I had some leftover cabbage that I doctored up to added some greens to it. And I even put this on social media. And then put some avocado on it and some beets in it. And so I'm constantly doing that kind of stuff. So you can use smoothies and you can do soup. Old vegetables are great in all those things. Freezing is fantastic. And then leftovers, eat your leftovers. Again, my middle name is efficiency. Time famine is one of my biggest issues. Time is my most valuable, precious resource. I never finish all the things I want to do, all the things I want to learn. I'm nowhere ever beginning to get finished it, ever. And so most all of my lunches are going to include some kind of leftover. So make a little bit more dinner, particularly if you're doing a healthy dinner, and then it's going to double for your lunch, right? So so many strategies there, and that's a big one. So
those are great ideas. So all these ideas sound so yummy for someone who already kind of likes to eat healthy, but many of our employees have children, small children, or picky husbands. So what kind of tips, you've talked about this in some of your books and some of your podcasts and things, but so can you tell the audience today what kind of tips you have for those picky children or picky husbands that or spouses, let's just say spouses, sure, that may not be excited about all those things you just talked about?
Yeah, so great question. And, I'm a parent, many people are, and, nothing is more important to us as parents than the health and well-being of our children, right? So that's important to acknowledge. And then beyond that, knowing that food, of all the things that impact health over your lifetime, nothing touches food choices. That's the top. Here we are again, just like for the environment. Isn't that interesting? Wow, not by coincidence. Food choices, that's the most important health decisions you make over your life in terms of your health is going to be your food choices, right? So parents need to know that. So what is the top thing a parent can do to instill healthy eating in their children? Actions are way, way, way more powerful than words. It's being a good role model. And that is the top, way, way more important than anything else. So is your child seeing you eat fruits and vegetables and whole grains and never drinking soda and just drinking water? So role modeling is number one. And the next thing is food environment, okay? If you don't know it, the single most powerful determinant of what anyone eats moment to moment is the foods in their immediate midst. And knowing that lots of foods are consumed at home, right? About half of calories consumed are home-based, then that home food environment really matters. So for thinking about your children, are there healthy choices available? Are the unhealthy choices not in there? Or way, way, way less, available, or a minority compared to healthy choices. So food environments really, really matter. The next thing is positive language. Couching health, children are more responsive, everyone is, to positives than negatives. So focus more on, oh my gosh, do you know the amazing things that are in these apples that can just totally transform your athletic performance and help you make good grades? They like that way better than, don't eat the potato chips or stop doing the soda. That will backfire often, right? And then sitting down for family meals. And then thinking about spouses, this is a common thing. I do a lot of my focus on women because they are the nutritional gatekeepers, and they do have more influence than any other demographic in trying to improve collective health. They do. Women are the movers and shakers. And I have a lot of women ask me, I can't get my husband, to embrace this. And a couple of things I'd say to men, one of the myths is, oh my gosh, I got to have all that beef and all that stuff to have big muscles. Totally not true. In fact, it's the opposite. And it relates to blood flow and some other things. The world record holder, the strongest man in the world, is vegan. And you probably know there's great stories of world-class athletes that went vegan and their performance shot through the roof. There's an entire documentary on this. It's called Game Changers. I highly recommend it. And the other thing men respond to is virility, good sex. Doctors, we can talk about that kind of stuff. And it ain't no contest. It ain't no contest. They feature that on Game Changers. You won't believe the impact of what, if you eat a lot of plants, how it will improve your sexual performance versus those animal-based foods. I mean, it's just wowing kind of. Okay, so that should get the men. Anyway, and the other thing is just, you can't ever beat love, and just say, you know what, I love you. And I care about you so much. I don't want you to die. I don't want you to have a heart attack. I don't want you to become impotent. You know, I don't want you to get colon cancer. You know, red meat is a cause and effect. It's black and white. We know it's a carcinogen, for at least in terms of colorectal cancer, particularly processed red meat. So many things you could say. And again, I think most of the reticence and most of the hesitation is driven by lack of knowledge of the facts, right?
I am so glad, Dr. Ann, that we have you on recording and record of saying some of that, because our team has been saying some of that for a long time, and we look like employees look at us like we have lizards coming out of our heads. So
yeah,
kudos to you. So it's Savi, you have the next question.
Yeah, so Dr. Ann, let's switch gears. What about plastic? How can we have an impact in this area as it relates to food, our diets, how we shop and store our food? Obviously, we know plastic isn't good for the environment, but what can we do in our everyday kitchen habits to make an impact here?
Great question. And, you know, first of all, we are very concerned about plastics, both for human health and environmental health. You know, the environmental aspects are pretty obvious. Plastics just don't go away. They're just not really biodegradable. In terms of human health, there are elements in plastics, BPA, antimony, phthalates, that we are now linking, and that data is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's everything from obesity, diabetes, infertility, some cancers, puberty abnormalities. So it's a big deal. What I tell people to do, if you knew what I knew, you would have zero plastic in your kitchen, particularly if you've got young children at home. Who's going to be the most at risk to these endocrine disruptors? It's your children, it's babies, it's developing fetuses. So no plastic in the kitchen. Get it out, and you can easily do that. Again, I do it all. I mean, that's why I can say all this stuff, because I do it, and it's not hard. You're going to use glass. You're going to use metal. You're going to try to minimize canned foods because they're lined in BPA. That means you're never going to do any canned beverages, because you don't ever need to do any canned beverages when you can just do water, right? And there's some canned goods that are great, and I don't want people to think they have to do no canned goods, but just be conscious of that. And then, you know, single-use plastics are, particularly for obvious reasons, a problem. So, like when I go to the grocery store, you know, why do people think they have to put every single fruit or vegetable they pick in a bag? I don't do it for any. I just put it directly in my cart, and that goes directly in my shopping bags, which the plastic bags are now banned. Grocery bags are most states are banning those. And, you know, so you have the ones that you bring from home, or you just do the paper. And I don't put my apples in a bag. I just select them and stick them right in the cart, and then they just go right in the grocery bag. And that works fine. Or if that bothers you and you like them more organized, then you can get reusable mesh bags. I have those as well, but I found that's kind of harder. I just put it right in. Again, I'm always looking for ways to save time. And so let's see. I think those are the big ones. And again, it's all very doable. Like my husband makes his lunch every day, and usually he's going to have a sandwich as part of his lunch. And he has a great metal. It's wonderful. Just a little metal tin. It keeps it perfect, and it can't move in there. So many simple, inexpensive things that you can do right in that kitchen to decrease that plastic. Thank you for a great question.
Great one. So, Chris, do we have any questions that have come in for Dr. Ann? We are running ahead of schedule, and if not, then I'm sure Dr. Ann has more information she can share.
I think this was touched on just a little bit, but one question that did come through, which is, Please talk about how to season vegetables in a flavorful and healthy way.
Great. So first of all, know that, fat is what gives food flavor. It carries flavor. And so you need to start with knowing what are the healthy oils. So, extra virgin olive oil is like, the king here. And so with pretty much any vegetable I'm going to do, there's going to be a little bit of extra virgin olive oil involved. And why don't we just talk about roasting? Because it's so easy, it's so brainless, and I don't think there's more delicious way to get people excited about chowing on vegetables than learning how to roast. So super simple. You're just going to take your big pan, your big baking sheet, and I will typically, because it's easy and fast, you can get pan sprays of heat-tolerant, healthy oils. A good example would be avocado oil, or it could be canola, right? And you can get these pan sprays, right? So you can put a little bit of pan spray on the pan. Then you're going to take whatever vegetable you want to roast, and really any veggie can be roasted. Maybe not lettuce, obviously, but carrots and sweet potatoes and broccoli and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, green beans, asparagus, you name it. And you lay them flat. If you want to cut them into chunks, you can, but like carrots, I do whole. I did cauliflower last night. I just, you just do chunks, just put chunks out there. Then you just take the spray, take the pan spray, same pan spray, and you just spray. If you want a light mist, you want to cover a light mist of that oil all over it. And I like the spray because it gives a nice even distribution. The alternative would be you can pour a little extra virgin olive oil, excuse me, in your clean hand, rub them together. And so like when I did my cauliflower last night, put the olive on my hand, rubbed them like this. And before I cut the cauliflower head, just one head, I just went, then I cut it, laid it flat. Okay, so you got your oil on, whatever one you're doing. Then you season it and put a little salt, put a little pepper. You should always do that. Assuming salt's safe for you. Most people, that kind of salt is going to be fine. Then you can do lemon. You can do mixed Italian herbs. You can do any herb or spice you want. And you just want to start using those herbs and spices like crazy. I was just experimenting the other day. I was like, oh my gosh, cumin, a really heavy dusting of cumin is delicious on broccoli. I'd never tried that combination. Anyway, so last night I used mixed Italian seasonings on that cauliflower, and you roast it. So what happens with roasting is you're naturally removing the water, which is going to concentrate the natural flavor. And because you're roasting, there's a caramelization. All veggies have small amounts of innate sugars. They get caramelized. Like the taste of roasted cauliflower is totally different than the taste of steamed cauliflower. And the other thing I like about roasting vegetables is they shrivel, but yet only thing that's coming out of them is their water. All those vitamins, all those minerals, all those phytochemicals, all that fiber is still in there, but because they're kind of shriveled, it's easier to eat a lot more of it. Like you can find, if you roast broccoli, a single person can easily eat an entire head of it. So I can see their smiles that y'all have had roasted veggies.
Yeah, that's my favorite way to cook them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a question I'm going to get back to, but I want to ask about, since we're talking about how to cook things, when you talked about brown rice, so that's sometimes a barrier for people because they're like, we can't ever get it past the crunchy state. So can you talk about like some brown rice hacks?
Sure.
You may have some of the same ones, but yeah.
Okay, so first of all, if you're used to white rice, which is very common, and you've tried the brown rice and it's like, oh, I'm just not used to that texture, then what you can do is a bridge is if you do parboiled, like Uncle Ben's would be an example, or the boil and bag brown rice. So Uncle Ben's parboiled brown rice or the boil and bag brown rice, you'll see that the texture of it is softer and more like white. And, listen, taste and even texture flavor is malleable. And once you start doing brown rice, you realize, oh my gosh, the texture, you start to crave that slight chewiness I don't know how people do white rice. I mean, plus white rice, it tastes like paste. It doesn't have flavor. And that's because the oil, there's brown, there's a little bit of oil in brown rice, but not in, once you turn it into white, you're removing that germ, which is where the oil is. That gives it a nice flavor. And the other thing is, you can cook your brown rice in a broth, like chicken broth or vegetable broth. That adds some flavor. And then you season it. Then I'm getting ready to do we're just producing a whole course right now on teaching people how to make healthy starches delicious. And so like when I do brown rice, I never just do plain brown rice. I'm always going to add green peas to it. That is just frozen peas. Just take them out at the end of the cooking of the brown rice. Just put a little bit in there, put the top back on. They get heated a little bit. They don't have to be cooked because they're already cooked, the baby peas. And it's just delicious. You'll never go back to just eating plain brown rice. You will always add the peas to it. And then why not add parsley? It makes it so appetizing, so flavorful. You can add herbs and spice. Anyway, so it's being creative, and it's not being held back, and it's just like kind of letting go in the kitchen. Just let go. It's okay.
Love that. So one other hack that I've done at health fairs and showed people how to do is to soak your brown rice. If you're going to cook it that night, soak it for half a day and then drain the water off. And that does help it get softer, more resembles what you would buy for Uncle Ben's or whatever. So it does make it more softer. So that's another way too. So we did have an employee ask, back to the fiber, how much fiber we should get a day, male and female, and children.
Sure. So these current recommendations, frankly, for those of us that really focus on nutrition and the microbiome, and they're kind of pathetically low, but for men, 37, women, you want to get, 30, 32. And for children, it's based on the number of calories they consume. So if it's a teenager, it's probably, close to the same, like 30, 32, 33. But what would be better for your health? Well, I'll tell you that early man, for 99.9% of the time that humans roamed the earth, they were hunter-gatherers. And one thing we know about our ancient ancestral hunter-gatherer diet is the average. The anthropologists that have studied everything about think they averaged 100 grams of fiber a day. So we as human beings evolved on a plant predominant. They were hammering plants. They had to. If they didn't eat, they couldn't survive, and that was more readily available than on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis than an animal, because they'd have to go hunt that. So if you could do 40 or 50, it would be better. All right. Just the point is, the more you can do, the better. And the more you do, the leaner you'll be, the healthier you'll be, the better you'll feel, the greater the benefit to the environment. Because when you eat, when you're eating a plant-based food, it's naturally shoving out the opportunity for an animal-based food. And that's another big part of both ways. So, there's a double hit when you do an unhealthy food. You not only have the adverse effects of the unhealthy food, it's shoved out an opportunity for you to bring the healthy one in, right? And vice versa. So when you have a healthy food, that's why we always say I tell people, focus on eating more of the food you love that you now know are really good for you. Mm-hmm. That's what's called a positive behavior change, because most people can do that, and it's naturally going to shove out hopefully something that is not as good for them.
Great advice. So we had another question, and the question is frozen vegetables versus fresh vegetables. Is there a difference, and what should the focus be?
So in a common myth, so frozen vegetables are just as nutritious. In some cases, they're more nutritious than their fresh counterparts. Why? Because vegetables that are grown for frozen transport can be grown to the peak of ripeness, because they're going to be picked and immediately flash frozen. We now have flash freezing technology, and vegetable producers, have this technology, and they know to do that. And there's a huge kick up in nutritional value of a plant-based food at peak ripeness, right? In those last days, reaching peak ripeness. And the flash freezing preserves nutrients. The other point I want to make is, food in terms of carbon footprint, food transportation costs are really small part of carbon emissions. So if you looked at 38 foods, there was a landmark study that did this, looking at 38 foods and the greenhouse gas carbon contribution of the transportation. And the average, if you took the average of all the 38 foods, is 5%. And something like, animal products is like 1% of the total. That's why way more important than where it comes from is the foods you are choosing to eat, right? So food transport is a minimal part overall of the environmental impact.
So a follow-up to that, I have two, I guess. One is, so we know frozen vegetables can even be healthier. Fresh is great. So what about the canned? I know you talked about a BPA versus a non-BPA can. But what about the nutritious value of a canned vegetable?
Okay, so canned vegetables are absolutely better than none at all, but relative to fresh or frozen or dried, sometimes things can be dried, the negatives can be that the heat exposure from canning can diminish some of the water-soluble nutrients, B vitamins, vitamin C. Water-soluble nutrients could also leach out into the liquid. Unless you drink the liquid, you may be missing out on some of those. And then the other problem is oftentimes excessive amounts of sodium. This is getting a little bit better, but boy, is there a lot of sodium added typically, not all, typically to canned vegetables. Now, what are the exceptions? There's certain canned veggies that are remarkable. Their nutritional value is on par. And so canned beans, canned tomato products, and some of this is related to the fact that sometimes the heat exposure actually increases nutrient bioavailability. That's the situation with canned tomato products. So if you had to pick from a health standpoint, what would be better, to have some canned tomatoes or fresh? The can is actually better for you. And that's kind of a rare thing, but that's an example. So canned tomato products, canned beans, things like, artichoke hearts, because again, they're so off the charts healthy, and otherwise you can't really get them fresh hardly ever, not much time of the year. So things like that are fine. And, there are a few others like, bell peppers, red peppers and olives and things like that you just otherwise can't get typically the other way. So
that's great. So, and then what about, so organic versus non-organic, or, the pesticide issue with our vegetables and how they're grown and the impact on our environment. So what are your thoughts?
Sure. So, obviously, organic is clearly, well, let me just get the facts on organic because it's a common question. So let's just focus on facts. Are organic vegetables and fruits, produce, does it have more nutrients? Well, it's kind of a wash. There's so many still in conventional that it's like, it's almost like not fair, but the scale tips slightly that the organic is a bit more nutritious. Typically, it's going to have more phytochemicals because phytochemicals form from stress. Plant stress is what makes them form, and organic produce is more stressed than conventional. And then they typically have more minerals because of the soil restrictions and like having to rotate your crops and things like that. What about, obviously if you do organic, you're going to have less pesticide exposure in your body. That is a fact. We can prove that. Does that matter for health? It's very hard to answer that question. Obviously, we know pesticides aren't healthy. They wouldn't have to be regulated, right? I think where it matters is young children, pregnant women. I think there are going to be issues with pesticides, particularly in those demographics of people. And then beyond that, what about for the environment? Yes, it's better if you had a choice for the environment to get organic versus conventional. Organic's going to be better. But again, I just want to have people have perspective. If you're talking about environmental influence, there's nothing that touches decreasing your red meat, decreasing your dairy, and decreasing your food waste. I mean, it's not even a contest.
Yeah.
Your impact of buying organic is just not nearly the impact of what you could get by just slightly decreasing your red meat.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
And
very good.
I try to do organic. We buy, I'm all about local, and I have a garden, and I like to know where my food comes from. I like to support the local farmers, and local foods are going to be. It's better for your community. It's better. They're typically fresher. Fresher is almost always going to be healthier. It's almost always going to be tastier. So I'm all about doing that. But again, food transport in terms of carbon footprint relative to those other things is just not that big. It's minimal. Yeah.
So we had a question about back to the vegetables. What temperature to roast
Yes.
and how long? What do you know? They're done?
Yes, I typically say on average anywhere 375 to 400. Know your oven. Some ovens cook hotter, some are not, whatever. And it depends on the vegetable. I usually use my timer when I've learned to, cauliflower is going to take a little bit longer. It might be 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, whereas sweet potatoes might be 19 minutes. So it varies, or green beans or asparagus might be 11 minutes, 12 minutes. So it's how soft do you like them, and the size of them and things like that. But 375, 400 degrees, and what you want to do, the best way is to look at them. So when they're perfect, they're going to be a little bit of brown. It's going to have a little bit of brown on them. Like if you're doing your cauliflower, you want your cauliflower that the top to have a little bit of golden brown, and that's usually when you see that, almost always the vegetable is tender enough or cooked enough through. But again, it's just play around with it, and you'll pick it up pretty fast. You can always Google it. A lot of how I do my cooking and develop new recipes. I got my my little laptop, right? I have that right in the kitchen with me. And I opened it up and like, what? And I always do 5-star. Why would you start with anything less? 5-star recipe for, let's say, whatever it may be. 5-star recipe for, pasta that has tomatoes in it or something, and just start playing around and, look at how they do it and tweak it if you want, or do it how they say. And so that's a lot of how I learned to cook my best thing.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice. Well, Dr. Ann, we can't thank you enough for being with us today, and your discussions are just so energizing, and we thank you. So our time is up. It's time for us to go to a commercial break, and we thank you for today.
I loved it. Thank you so much for what all of you do. Right. Mm-hmm. Great. Have a great day. Bye.